You know, when you look at a blueprint for like a massive towering skyscraper, you don't just see the glass and the steel.
Right, you see the structure.
Exactly. You see the stress points, you see the load-bearing walls. The architect can essentially point to a cross-section and say, this is exactly how we keep the whole thing from collapsing.
Yeah, you see the structural integrity made visible.
Right. But what if the blueprint isn't for a building? What if you are looking at the structural blueprint for a conspiracy theory?
Oh, that is a fascinating way to frame it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're unpacking something for you that is, well, it's complex, highly controversial, and historically significant.
It's really significant, yeah.
Our source material today is a series of excerpts from a text titled The International Jew. And this was originally published back in the 1920s by Henry Ford Sr.'s newspaper, which was called the Dearborn Independent.
Right, and the specific version we're looking at today was later abridged by a man named Gerald L. Smith.
So the mission for this deep dive is to dissect the anatomy of this historical propaganda. We really want to pull apart the specific rhetorical strategies and claims it uses to construct its worldview.
But before we get into the mechanics of this text, we have a mandatory and absolute disclaimer for you.
Yes, very important.
The sources we are examining today contain extreme, politically charged, and explicitly anti-Semitic content. We are impartially reporting on the content provided solely to analyze its historical arguments and its rhetorical structure.
Right.
We do not endorse these viewpoints, we do not take sides, and we do not validate any of these claims. We are simply conveying and analyzing the ideas as they're contained in the original source material.
Exactly. We're just looking at the blueprint. And, every blueprint has to start with a foundation.
Yep, the origin story.
Right, because before this narrative even attempts to convince you of its arguments, it has to legitimize itself to the reader, right? So it constructs this elaborate origin story designed to make you feel like you're holding some dangerous, suppressed truth.
Oh, absolutely. It sets the stage by claiming that Henry Ford Sr., right at the peak of his industrial career, basically began to feel that money changers were trying to steal his business.
Money changers.
Yeah, that's the term they use, allegedly engineered by powerful Jewish financiers. So the text claims he spared no expense, spending millions commissioning researchers to investigate, and then publishing the results in his company's official organ.
And of course, the narrative immediately introduces this concept of a massive cover-up, right?
Oh, definitely. It describes this terrific howl from what it calls official Jewry. It details boycotts, physical threats, smear campaigns, character assassination aimed at Ford.
They even claim sneak thieves were involved, right?
Yeah, it goes so far as to claim that sneak thieves were actually commissioned to visit libraries across the country just to steal the report.
Wow.
Effectively making the book a rare, unfindable collector's item. And by claiming the book is being hunted and destroyed by powerful forces, the narrative instantly elevates its own value.
Right. It signals to the reader that, hey, this information is so dangerous to the establishment that it had to be erased.
Exactly. It's the classic forbidden knowledge hook.
But the historical record shows that Henry Ford eventually issued a formal apology and ordered the books destroyed. Like, that is the accepted official history.
It is. But Gerald L. Smith introduces a massive twist into this foundation.
Right. The 1940 interview.
Yes. Smith claims that in a personal interview in 1940, Ford told him a shocking secret. Ford allegedly said he never actually signed that famous apology.
Which is just wild to think about.
Oh, it gets crazier. Smith relies on a later corroborating book by a man named Harry Bennett to support this. The narrative paints Bennett as this officious and aggressive Ford employee who just took it upon himself to negotiate with figures from the American Jewish Committee.
People like Louis Marshall and Arthur Brisbane, right?
Exactly. Bennett allegedly admitted he could mimic Ford's signature perfectly, so he just signed the apology to make the controversy go away and kept Ford himself entirely in the dark.
I mean, reading this feels exactly like a modern corporate PR crisis.
Oh, totally.
Like when a rogue executive issues a statement behind the founder's back just to appease the shareholders, while the founder secretly stands by the original controversial product.
That's a great analogy. It validates the reader's baseline suspicion of institutional narratives.
Right, because if the apology was just a forgery orchestrated by corporate fixers, then the original text remains pure. It positions the reader as an insider being handed this forbidden knowledge.
And once that foundation of forbidden knowledge is poured, the narrative moves to build its historical framing.
Oh, the Columbus stuff.
Yes. It aggressively rewrites the foundational myths of American history to place Jewish influence at the very genesis of the continent's discovery.
Right, it takes aim at Christopher Columbus. It basically dismisses the traditional narrative of Queen Isabella pawning her jewels as just a pleasant story that's been destroyed by cool research.
Right. Instead, it claims the 1492 voyage was financed by secret Jews or Marranos.
Marranos, yeah. Let's pause on that term, actually, because the source material drops it without much historical context for the reader.
It really does.
Historically, these were Jews in Spain and Portugal who were forced to convert to Christianity during the Inquisition under threat of death or exile. And many continued to practice Judaism in secret.
Right, it was a matter of survival.
Exactly. But the source material completely strips away the terrifying reality of the Inquisition. It reframes these forced conversions simply as this calculated deception to infiltrate the Spanish court and bankroll Columbus.
Yeah, specifically naming figures like Luis de Santigel and Gabriel Sanchez, who allegedly advanced 17,000 ducats for the expedition.
17,000 ducats.
Yep. And then it claims at least 5 Jews traveled with Columbus, singling out Luis de Torres, the interpreter.
Oh, and they claim he was the first man ashore, right?
The first man ashore, the first to discover the use of tobacco, and they literally call him the founding father of the modern Jewish monopoly on the tobacco business.
Which is just a massive leap. But it traces this unbroken line from 1492 straight to the foundation of New York, doesn't it?
It does. The text describes how Jewish immigrants fled Brazil and arrived in the Dutch colony of what is now New York. And the Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, tried to expel them.
But the Dutch West India Company overruled him.
Exactly. They forced him to accept them. And the narrative claims this intervention happened solely because of the large amount of capital the Jews had invested in the shares of the company.
See, there is a glaring paradox in the logic of the source material right here, because the text explicitly states that once they arrived, the Jews were forbidden by Stuyvesant to enter public service or open normal retail shops.
Right, they were legally shut out.
Exactly, shut out of the traditional economy. They went into foreign trade. They started dealing in old clothes, waste, rags, and rabbit skins, like originating the salvage system.
Which makes sense.
Right, yet the narrative frames this pivot as a sinister, calculated takeover of the fur trade and foreign commerce. I mean, it takes a classic example of human resilience, an immigrant group being legally banned from normal work and adapting to survive, and twists it into evidence of a predatory monopoly.
That's exactly how the rhetoric functions. It acknowledges the historical discrimination, but completely removes the context of survival.
It's entirely backward.
And it uses that historical adaptation to explain modern monopolies, asserting that the vast modern control over theater, movies, meatpacking, shoes, and news is the direct result of these early trading maneuvers.
It even claims that what the world calls American business methods are actually Jewish methods.
Right. By convincing the reader that the supposed enemy wasn't just a recent arrival, but the secret hand guiding the ship from day one, it transforms a demographic shift into a centuries-old structural invasion.
So if the historical rewrite is the framing of this blueprint, the economic argument is the primary load-bearing wall.
Oh, absolutely. The narrative argues this dominance isn't just about population growth.
Though it does note the population grew, right? Like from about 4,000 in George Washington's time to an increase of over 3.3 million 50 years later.
It does mention that, yes. But it claims this dominance is really driven by a fundamentally incompatible philosophy of work and capital. The text contrasts what it calls the Anglo-Saxon idea of make with the Jewish idea of get.
Make versus get. Let's unpack that because it's a huge part of their argument.
Right, so the make philosophy is described as creative labor.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mechanic, the farmer, the builder, who possesses sturdy character and takes genuine pride in craftsmanship.
Like they actually have an affection for the thing they are creating.
Yes, and money is supposedly secondary to the joy of useful labor. The narrative argues this is the foundation of a solid, healthy society.
And then it contrasts that with the get philosophy, which it frames as sordid acquisition.
Sordid acquisition, exactly.
This mindset allegedly has no attachment to the work itself and finds no joy in creative labor. It is solely about dealing in the things that other men make and extracting a profit from them.
And the narrative claims this get philosophy is being intentionally weaponized through what they call communist colleges.
Right, in major industrial cities like Chicago, New York, and Cleveland.
Yep. These institutions supposedly exist to systematically poison the minds of American workers, replacing their sturdy make mentality with this destructive get mentality, like getting mine while the getting is good.
To really understand why this specific argument was so potent, for the listener, you have to look at the economic reality of the
Oh,
1920s.
definitely. America was undergoing a massive, painful transition.
Exactly. Going from an agrarian, artisanal economy to a mass industrial, financialized economy. And honestly, ironically, Henry Ford's own assembly lines were a major driver in alienating workers from the traditional craftsmanship the text romanticizes.
The irony is pretty stark, yeah.
It feels incredibly similar to modern anxieties, too, like Main Street manufacturing versus Wall Street financialization. People today are anxious about an economy where hedge funds and financial engineering seem to generate more wealth than actually building physical products.
Right, it's a very familiar feeling.
What this blueprint does is take a universal, completely understandable economic anxiety about industrialization and capital and aggressively racializes it. It puts a specific ethnic face on a systemic, global economic shift.
Because when people feel economically dislocated, they look for a clear cause. The narrative provides a simple, binary scapegoat. It tells the reader it isn't the complex, impersonal evolution of global capitalism that's hurting you, it's this specific group of people with an alien philosophy of get.
It offers a manufactured clarity to very real economic pain.
Exactly. And moving up the architecture of this blueprint, the narrative shifts from the factory floor to the cultural institutions.
The churches and the colleges.
Right. It argues that to secure this economic dominance, the core cultural pillars of America had to be intentionally destabilized. It says economic control requires controlling the mind and the soul of the nation.
So looking at the churches, the text claims that theological seminaries have been invaded by Jewish German higher criticism.
Higher criticism, yes.
And we should definitely define higher criticism for you, because the text throws it out there almost like a slur.
It does treat it like a weapon.
Right. But in the real world, higher criticism was a 19th century academic movement, largely out of Germany, that sought to study the Bible as a historical and literary document, rather than taking every single word as literal, infallible history.
It was essentially a scholarly evolution in how theology was approached.
Exactly. But the narrative frames this academic movement as a deliberate weapon designed to weaken Christian doctrine.
It argues that instead of traditional, robust Anglo-Saxon religion, the churches have adopted these flabby sociological theories of brotherhood and socialism.
Flabby sociological theories.
That's the phrasing. It complains that the pulpit has been turned into a forum for economic mush prepared by Jewish professors of political economy, rather than a place for strong moral instruction.
And from the pulpit, the text moves to the education system. It outlines a very specific two-step strategy here.
Step one being the secularization of the public schools.
Right. The narrative argues that removing religion from public education is a deliberate tactic to strip away Anglo-Saxon culture and patriotism, basically ensuring the child has no grounding in their heritage.
And then step two is to Judaize the universities. The idea is that once the student arrives at college, untethered from their traditional values, they are targeted. The text points to the natural rebelliousness of youth as a vulnerability that gets exploited by revolutionary social doctrines.
It names specific groups doing this, right? Like the intercollegiate socialist societies and the Jewish Chautauqua.
Yes, it claims these are the vehicles pouring contempt on traditional landmarks while promoting radical ideas. But for context, the Jewish Chautauqua Society was simply an educational organization designed to spread knowledge about Judaism.
Modeled after the broader American Chautauqua movement of adult education.
Exactly. But the narrative categorizes it alongside socialist societies as an instrument of subversion.
Honestly, it seems like they're just taking any societal change they don't like, whether that's academic historical analysis, labor rights, the secularization of schools, or the spread of minority educational programs, bundling it all under the label of liberalism and blaming it on one source.
That's exactly what they're doing.
They take completely disparate movements and weave them into a single monolithic conspiracy.
Because that is the core mechanism of a grand unified conspiracy theory. The narrative refuses to accept that society changes organically.
Right.
If a church becomes more focused on social justice, or if universities encourage critical thinking about history, the text cannot view that as a natural progression of thought or culture. It must be a calculated subversion.
Grouping all modern changes under the umbrella of a single enemy gives the reader a sense of order. The world isn't chaotic and naturally evolving, it's just under attack.
Right. And the solution, therefore, isn't the hard work of adapting to a changing world, but simply naming and removing the enemy.
So, if these institutions are being systematically subverted, as the text claims, it really begs the question of motive.
Why do it at all?
Right. And the source material asserts that the ultimate goal of all this economic and cultural manipulation is the preservation of a separate, superior national identity. Which brings us to the penthouse of the blueprint, the concept of the nation within a nation.
The narrative argues that Jews do not wish to assimilate, but actively seek to remain a separate entity wherever they go.
And to prove this, the text makes a startling claim about the origin of the ghetto.
Oh, this part is wild. It argues that historically, Jews chose to live in ghettos to avoid Gentile contamination.
Gentile contamination.
Yes, it claims the idea of being contaminated by outside influence originated with the Jews, and that the ghetto was the true preserver of Judaism.
Which completely ignores the centuries of European laws and decrees that legally forced Jewish populations into walled, segregated slums.
Completely ignores it. And to back up this claim of intentional separation, the narrative does something incredibly strategic with its citations.
Right, it quotes actual Jewish rabbis.
Yeah, Dr. D. Dissolopul, Dr. M.H. Segal, and Israel Friedlander.
And these rabbis are quoted discussing how the dense, traditional communities of the old world ghettos preserved Jewish life, and how the absolute freedom and Americanism of the United States actually posed a threat to the vitality of their faith, leading to a loss of tradition.
The narrative uses these quotes to definitively state that Jewish leaders view American civilization as an enemy to be destroyed. It frames their theological concern as a political declaration of war.
But reading the actual quotes from those rabbis reveals a masterful, cynical weaponization of language.
How so?
Well, what those rabbis are expressing is a poignant, universal immigrant lament. Any group coming to a free, modern society worries about their children assimilating, losing their native language, and abandoning their traditional religion.
Oh, absolutely. It is a completely normal anxiety about cultural loss in a melting pot.
Exactly. But the text twists that religious anxiety into a literal admission of anti-American subversion. They take a fear of losing one's culture and rebrand it as a confession of treason.
And the narrative pushes this idea of separateness to its ultimate extreme by asserting that because their true loyalty is only to their own nation, they operate outside the bounds of regular national conflicts.
Right. The text claims that wars are the Jews' harvests.
Yes, portraying them as profiteers and spies who play both sides for financial gain. It even alleges that the center of this global Jewish power intentionally shifted to the United States following the Civil War to capitalize on the emerging wealth here.
So the blueprint is complete. We can see the entire structural architecture of the narrative.
We really can. Synthesizing what we have unpacked today reveals a highly calculating master narrative.
It really does.
It begins with a foundational claim of victimhood to hook the reader with the suppressed book and the forged topology. Then it constructs a historical frame by rewriting the Columbus voyage to make the threat seem ancient and deeply embedded.
Right, and then it erects the load-bearing walls by exploiting very real economic anxieties, creating that make versus get framework to racialize the fear of modern capitalism and industrialization.
Finally, it finishes the structure by weaponizing cultural fears. It takes the secularization of schools, the theological evolution of churches, and the natural assimilation anxieties of immigrants, and bundles them all into proof of a monolithic, destructive conspiracy aimed at tearing down Anglo-Saxon society.
You know, understanding the mechanics of a historical text like this is vital for you, the listener, because propaganda doesn't usually invent things out of thin air.
No, it rarely does.
The most effective propaganda takes legitimate societal stress points, fear of losing your job to a changing economy, fear of your kids being taught things you don't understand, fear of institutions changing too fast, and it repackages those fears into scapegoating.
Exactly. Recognizing how that machinery works helps us critically evaluate the media and the political rhetoric we consume right now. By seeing the structural math of this specific historical blueprint, you are better equipped to spot those same load-bearing walls in modern arguments.
You can recognize when an economic shift is being blamed on an ethnic group, or when organic cultural change is being framed as a coordinated attack.
It's a crucial skill.
It really is. And we're going to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We've just seen how a society's profound anxieties about rapid economic change, the secularization of education, and shifting demographics were cleanly bundled and weaponized into a unified conspiracy theory about one specific group over a century ago.
Right.
So ask yourself what current cultural anxieties in our world today are ripe for a similar rhetorical hijacking. And if you look closely at the modern media landscape, who might be drafting that new blueprint right now?